Let's bring in Jim Barker, weekly chat for EMJ Marketing. Hey, Jim, good to see you again. Before we jump to the CFL stuff, viewer asked what we think about Colin Kaepernick going to the Jets. What do you think the chances are of that happening with Aaron Rodgers down?
0 to none. I can't even visualize a guy who hasn't played that long coming back and being able to contribute. And even the terminology and things that was used when he was playing is all different. And again, I think it's kind of that's stranger things have happened, but that one would shock me. I thought they should have gone out with Nathan Rourke. Honestly.
Okay. Can you, well, let's go down that road. How hard or difficult would it have been for them to do that?
My bet is if they would have claimed him, that Jacksonville might have activated him to the 53. I'm not positive of that, but I don't think they would. I think they know what they have. I really do. He's protected in that they can always activate him, and that's what I'm guessing would happen. But again, for the Jets, Rourke is a lot like the Wilson, and they're similar type size. They're similar arm strengths. They both run well. The offenses would be very transferable between the two. I thought it was that would have been a legitimate thing, but those NFL guys know better. Joe Douglas, he's got it.
I gotcha. Hey, the Hall of Fame.
The other thing I thought was interesting, Rod, was the caller from Calgary. He not only needs to be cheering like crazy for the Elks, but he needs tomorrow to be cheering like crazy for the Bombers to blast the Hamilton Tiger Cats. The only two teams that stand in Calgary's way at this point that they don't control is Saskatchewan and Hamilton. They have to be better than one of those two to make the playoffs. And so that's kind of a no-brainer. But I thought it's kind of interesting, having been in Calgary for so long, the thought that this weekend they have to cheer for the Elks and then turn around the next day and cheer for the Bombers.
Well, you know what? I'm actually glad you brought that up because I spent a lot of the last 2 years in Calgary, made a lot of friends, a lot of great relationships, and now people are asking me, what's wrong with the Stamps? They have a great fan base in Calgary, but they're 4-9, and they don't know what to do with themselves, and they want answers, the fans, and I don't really have the answers. What do you think's wrong with the 4-9 Calgary Stampeders?
I'm never one that uses injuries because everybody has them. And I think they've had all their game breakers have been hurt and on and off the roster, and they haven't been able to get in any continuity. I honestly believe the Dave Dickinson move to GM hurt him as a coach. I think he's maybe getting more involved now, but that's tough to do mid-season to all of a sudden now you're going to change gears and get more involved. So I think that had a much bigger effect on that team than anybody's willing to talk about. The collapse against the Elks was epic, and there's no explaining that. I mean, it's impossible to explain. They're doing things they've never done. They're giving up more big plays on special teams than they've ever done. Mark Killam, we hired him back in 2005 from Cochrane High School, and the special teams he didn't start doing special teams till like 2007. He was our strength coach at first, but they've always were solid. And now it's like they can't run a special team without there being a penalty. It seems like every single return there's a penalty. So it's just weird the way the whole thing has come down this year in Calgary. And again, I don't know that you can put your finger on one thing. I think they still have a slew of good players. I think that, like I say, injuries, it's hard to get continuity when you're moving key players in and out. When they lost Malik Henry, that was a big loss for them because he was their big go-to, big play guy. And in this league, you need big plays. You need to be able to make big plays. You cannot count on long drives.
Hey, I love the analysis and I appreciate it. And I've been doing this in my role a long time. When fans come to you with the questions, you got to try and find the answers. And I don't know if I think you look at it from a coach's perspective, but I talked to a coach the other day. Dang, I'd love to name him, but I can't. former Stamps coach. He's like, it ain't coaching, Rod. They don't have big enough practice rosters. Dave threatened to make changes, but he can't make changes because they don't have players on the practice roster. I'm like, there's that. You know what I mean? Like, they're always going to defend the management.
I can tell you who you were talking to. I know.
Yeah, I know. Don't say it. Don't say it. It's a pretty good imitation. Yeah. I talk to him a lot, so I can imitate him well. What are your other thoughts on Week 15 games?
Well, again, I think the games today are the better of the two games. Are the four games this weekend. The Toronto game is intriguing. Montreal just got smashed last week, and physically. And I brought it up on the air. It was the worst linebacking I'd ever seen in the CFL in a long time. They were playing Frederic Chagnon at starting middle linebacker, and they moved Beverett out to Sam linebacker, and playing Bryce Notary, a rookie at will, and they just got run over. So they go out and get Darnell Sankey. They've got Avery Williams back. They're moving Beverett back to will linebacker. They're going to dress Stubblefield to play Sam. So maybe that will help shore it up. But to do that, they have to change their ratio, which means they'll be playing one of either Desjardins at tackle when Jamal Davis is in, or they'll play Ugawak on the edge when Sewell plays inside. It's one of those 23 play and that rule, because Sewell's been in the league so long. So he's one of those designated veteran guys that can be a Canadian for 23 plays. So, that's what they have to do now. So now their front is affected. Toronto hasn't been sacked since August 9th. No front has gotten to them, and
it's amazing.
It is pretty amazing. But I think that them making these changes on their defense, they're attacking one thing, but they're weakening another, which is so crucial, which is pass rush. And it's going to be an interesting game. Like I say, their secondary, they've got their only backup in the secondary is Lindley. So if a guy goes down, now Stubblefield's got to move back and play halfback or corner. And he really is I like him as a Sam. He's a bigger guy, but he's not a halfback or corner. But that's the direction there. So I love looking at the rosters and what teams are doing. So it'll be interesting to see what Toronto does, because Toronto's down receivers. Curly Gittins is on the 6th game. He's probably not going to be back for a while. They're missing Cam Phillips. So they're actually dressing another running back, Deonta McMahon, I saw him at the CGS game with Alex Russell. We watched him as he was a great tailback, and that's what he went to training camp as a tailback. But with Ouellette and Harris and Adeboboye and Javon Leake, it's tough to make this team as a tailback. They're going to play him at slot, and he's a dynamic player. He's got great quickness and ability with the ball in his hands. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him. But they're down 2 receivers, so it's not like Toronto's coming into this game healthy.
I got one for you. The $64,000 question. Last week, you and I both picked Ottawa to win based on rest. They had 11 days. Hamilton had 3. What happened? Hamilton won. So is the rest thing overstated, or is Ottawa just that bad?
I'm going to say Ottawa's that bad. I really felt like their whole approach to the game was wrong. I mean, you've got a team coming off a 3 days rest, and you're coming off of 2 weeks. You ought to have some kind of no-huddle tempo offense, something to keep them on the field, to at least mentally make them think they're tired. There was not one thing they did to do that. So, like I say, Ottawa's fallen off my list on that game. Again, this week they could lose by 30. I mean, it's. I just lost a lot of. I thought they would come out. This was a huge game for them to keep them involved. They're out now. Their chances of making it they're maybe not mathematically eliminated, but their chances are becoming very slim. So,
hey, you've been in that position before. Go ahead.
No doubt. So
the reason I say that, Yeah, go ahead, and then I'll finish up when you're
No,
done.
you go ahead. Tell me what you're going to say.
Well, just that you've been in that position because you were in the league a long time. They can get a head start on next year now. Some people in that organization will be doing that. That's the benefit, I would think, about being out of it this early.
Well, there's never a benefit to being out of it because guys are going to, I don't know. It's a difficult situation. I don't know how much of a head start. The GM's been there for 2 years. I think when if a GM or a head coach was to come in early and going to evaluate and think, then maybe it has some. But when you're out of it, it is difficult. It's difficult to get guys motivated. The whole thing is just difficult. And they go to BC this week, and BC's coming off a bye. And I bet you they hit them with some things that a team coming off of a bye does. I mean, that Ottawa secondary is as bad as any I've seen. They're terrible, and I think it's going to be interesting. But I honestly believe BC could really do some damage to Ottawa. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's a heck of a game. The game tonight, the Edmonton Sask game, boy, that's one I want to talk about because that's going to be an interesting game. This is for Edmonton. It's crucial for them to make the playoffs. Just like Calgary, they've lost the tiebreaker already to Saskatchewan. But they have to catch Saskatchewan or Hamilton. Now Hamilton's in a lot of problems because they got Tundi Adeleke. They got their secondaries down. Dylan Wynn's down. Figueroa's not playing. They're moving Revenberg, a great guard, out to tackle where he's an average tackle, and playing Jacob Zod at guard. So they're beat to heck. So maybe that's the team that the crossover can happen with. But for Edmonton, they need to beat Saskatchewan tonight. For Trey Ford, what is he? Is he the guy that throws for 21 yards? When I thought Calgary's approach to him was really interesting. They didn't rush. They kind of stayed on the line of scrimmage and said, we're not going to give you run lanes by penetrating and allowing you to slide through. There's no linebackers that can tackle him in the open field. He made Micah Alway look silly. I think between Larry Dean and Micah Tights, I'm not sure they're as athletic as Alway and Cam Judge. And so he's difficult in so many respects that way, but they made him stay there and said, you're going to throw it. Now, we're going to drop sometimes 9 guys, and the windows aren't going to be big, and we're going to break on the ball, but we're all looking at you, and we're going to make you throw it to beat us. Now, he's got Eugene Lewis. That's a huge factor because Eugene Lewis can be covered, and he's still going to come down with the ball. There's not many guys like him in the league. I thought your conversation right before me was really interesting because they do need a couple big plays. They need to make a few big plays. The Saskatchewan front, much better than what they saw in Calgary. I think that front with Lanier and the whole group of them. Robertson's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And Philip Blake is back. He's going to be a backup this week. But he gives them so much flexibility. I thought at the end of the year, he was one of the best tackles in our league. He was playing left tackle for us in Toronto when I was there. And I grew so much respect for him. They could take and play him at either right or left tackle and change the ratio. And now, instead of a young Jackson Ford playing free safety, you move Moncrief back there and you play Revis and Sam. And they become a much better football team. So I thought when Jeremy O'Day went after him, we didn't want to lose him in Toronto. I was there at that point. We didn't want to lose him, but we couldn't afford him. And he deserved the money he got, and we couldn't afford to do that. I thought it was a really shrewd signing by him because of what he can do to the ratio. There's not a whole lot of Canadians in the league that can do what Philip Blake can do. So I think that's huge, him just dressing as a backup this week for what the future, what can happen for the Riders in terms of their team. So, but I love their defensive front. I think their defensive front's going to do a much better job on Kevin Brown. So, I think it's going to be a great game tonight.
I'll leave you with this. Now that you've sniffed out that coach I was talking to, and everybody can guess who it is. I think my imitation's too good. But you said the people that watch this show, You said to people that watch this show, he was watching last week. Remember when we said that Trey Ford was compared to Doug Flutie by Jones? My coach was, now, Rod, no, Doug, he scrambled to pass. Ford scrambles to run. There's a difference now. And you can
see my
you
biggest
can
thing. My biggest thing with Ford is a running quarterback. He's Tracy Ham. He's a running quarterback who's trying to learn to become a passer. He wants to be a passer. Doug, well, again, I was only with him his last year in the CFL, so I saw him at his very best. He was a straight passer who would run if he had to. And there's a huge difference between those two. So, it's
but they're both in the Hall of Fame. Tracy and Doug are both in the Hall of Fame. So Trey's on the right path.
Tracy deserves it. And Tracy became a passer. And I think that will happen with Trey if the teams are patient with him, just like they had to be with Tracy.
Tracy's a fantastic guy, too. Jim, thanks for this. Have a great broadcast this weekend.
Great. Thanks, Ron.
CFL on TSN's Jim Barker.